Hey everybody, how's it going? So today we're talking about Azimanak 13, the dungeon that I found to be very difficult in the past, but now, it, to be honest, has become very easy. Once you start understanding mechanics, understand how it works, it is not too difficult to do. So, I'm going to go over my team, I'm going to go over how I'm actually going to do it, what the actual Azimanak boss does, what you need to consider, and a little bit of gear that I'm going to be using and why I'm actually using specific gear. It's a little bit of a guide, but of course, I will not offer specific stats because I think it's quite versatile in the way you can do this, especially if you're not trying to, do like a 30-second clear or something like that. So, straight away, looking at my team, I want to mention the pretty core basic things. First of all, with any team, you want a tank. In most cases, you can use Aros, you can use Brig, you can also use Falcon and Clary, which Falcon and Clary is also a pretty good option. Those are free-to-play tanks you can use. I recommend using one of them. Aros is a character I know a lot of people use. Brig is someone I find to be the most reliable for me personally. Next up, we have the healer. Like in most of these cases, in most story, in anything, you need a healer. Most of the time, Tamarin is the best for this, if not the best, just straight up. I'll just be honest, she is very, very good for this. Tamarin is a very solid heal in the game. Don't have to tell you that really. You can also use Monrancy. The special change Monrancy can also go in, and also Water Angelica, who is the 4-star. You can also use her as well. In terms of debuffers, basically strip slash debuffers slash insane value, Iceria. Iceria is really, really good. One of the best options for this. She is just ridiculously good to have, and in general, very useful unit. You can, I guess, really use anyone that can strip. It's really up to you, but this is really the best choice, like without a doubt. Especially with Tamarin, number one, perfect. Then you have Green Vildred in there, perfect combo. But regardless, you can technically use like maybe like a Falcon and Clary as well in there instead of Iceria because she can strip. Really, anyone that can strip. If you have a mage and you just really want to use him in this, you can also get an artifact here in the Hall of Trials exchange that strips. Stripping is something that's very important because we're going to need to get rid of one of the buffs. You can get Isle of Violin. You're going to have to max this out for 80% chance. It's not even 100%, but if you want to go ahead and use like a Water Luluka or anyone that maybe, can help your AoE damage dealer, that's a mage, you can throw it onto them and it will technically work. But my best number one advice is use Iceria. I would probably, in my own shoes, probably use Falcon and Clary if I did not have Iceria. Most likely, but there might be better options. So, last one we talk about is the damage dealer. Your damage dealer has to do AoE damage. This is very, very important. Ideally, enough AoE damage to clear 2 lower things next to the boss. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but in my case, I'm going to use 3 Spiriteria. Not the best option for sure. I think Green Vildred is probably the best. You can really get away with a lot of characters though. You can use Mercedes, who's literally a free character. You can use ML Vildred if you have him. You can use really mostly any AoE DPS, and they will tend to work majority of the time. So, let's go into this and let's go over what this boss actually does, because once you kind of get a hang of it, it really isn't too bad in my opinion. I think this is something that you can do as a new player relatively easily. I pretty much made this team in like 7 to 8 days. The main thing you really can distinguish with is how long it's going to take. With better gear, with better stats, you might do it a bit quicker. Obviously with this team, it might be quicker than using, for example, Falcon and Clary instead of Iceria, because Tamarin and Iceria are just such a good combo. And like I mentioned, Green Vildred as well in there. Chef's Kiss. Actual Chef's Kiss. The great thing about Iceria as well is literally this skill right there reduces the cooldown of Tamarin, which makes her able to use his 3rd skill. I find it to be very good. Also, with my boy Brig. Brig, I find to not be talked about that much for this. Some people do use Aros. But I'm going to talk about how Aros is a little bit different in terms of usage. Because of Aros, you have to have him on his 1st skill and set as the 1st skill. You don't want him to use your other skills unless you are confident you can strip. So, we are in the boss right now. Throughout this boss, he will bleed us quite a lot. With these bleed debuffs, if you have anything on your Soul Weaver that can remove debuffs with the artifact, like Wondrous Potion Vial, I believe it's called. That will make this a little bit easier, or you can also make your healer just pump out as much healing as possible, and that can also be a good way of dealing with this. So, you will see that a boss has this buff right now. Damage reduction reduces damage by single attacks by 80%. This straight away makes AoE damage better, but one way to get rid of this is by getting rid of these two fellas. This is why bringing an AoE DPS is not only helpful against the boss because he takes more damage from it, but also you can get rid of this by bringing an AoE DPS. Simple as that. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of these two little things. In most cases, the best way of doing this is one-shotting them because they don't have that crazy HP. It requires a little bit of gear, but of course, if you have the gear, try and one-shot them both. In my case, I can't, but it still works anyway. So, we're just going to go ahead and just do this. One reason why Brig is a bad option with Iseria is because if you get 3 debuffs onto the boss, luckily we didn't get 3 debuffs there. With 3 debuffs, he will cleanse. So technically using an A-Ross makes more sense on first skill because he will strip and not add another debuff. Do we get it here? I'm curious. Because Brig can debuff twice. There you go. Yeah. Obviously not ideal. But the barrier helps in a way as well. Right, there we go. So we're just going to keep doing this. What we want to go ahead and do is try and get this other fella here if we can. We of course do not have our AoE available to us right now, unfortunately. You will notice though my free spirit area is on the first EE. First exclusive equipment. That makes this a little bit better because she actually reduces the cooldown of her second skill, which is AoE, when she hits a dark unit. Dark unit, right, is literally the boss. So technically makes her a little bit more viable. We might have the same problem we had before as well, which would obviously not be ideal. Kind of a reason why Brig is probably not the best choice. Thankfully, we did not put the debuff on, but not really a world you want to be in. I'm still using Brig just because Brig is just very solid for Wyvern. Honestly, I think he's a curse and a positive at the same time. Right, and as some, okay, this is where I want to talk about the Berserk buff. This is probably the third final thing you really want to consider. Apart from killing the 2 little ads he has next to him, and also making sure, well, you have an AoE DPS, the Berserk buff is something that will stack up every 4 times your ally's attack. With this will increase his attack and defense by 20% and speed by 10%. This Berserk buff will actually increase level and become even more deadly for you. The main thing you want to do is strip it. This is why we have Iseria here. This is why I keep talking about Brig and A-Ross having strips. As long as you strip this Berserk buff, you are in a good place. So can we strip? Let's see. Brig is very reliable. I will say that Brig is very reliable. He usually gets the job done. We got rid of it there, and now we don't have to worry about as much. Free Spirit Area also does offer a third skill defense break, which doesn't make it specifically the best, but it still does help. It still does help. I would definitely say trying to one-shot the little ads there definitely is the best way to go, but if it works, it works. Right, he has the Berserk buff. Let's go ahead and strip it, as we should right now. Iseria is pretty reliable generally. We did not strip. That's why bringing another stripper is good in terms of your tank. Now we're going to go ahead and strip the buff here most likely. Basically increasing our chance of stripping in the most ways possible while not making this team super unreliable. And we should be able to kill just here, right? Tamarind can also increase tap bar, or combat readiness of your allies, which also helps. Another even great point as well is Iseria can also defense break on the first skill, which makes dealing damage a little bit easier. A lot of these little factors add up. And there we go. It's done. That is as simple as that. I hope that makes sense. 3 main things to take away from that. Strip the buff that he gets. The Berserk buff has to be stripped. Bring an AoE DPS. And make sure the AoE DPS can actually kill the 2 little ads. And that is literally as simple as it gets. Then it literally comes to survivability. Right, now let's talk about the characters and how they're built. Like I mentioned before, there is a lot of different options. I've talked about them already. Let's talk about the builds. The builds are incredibly simple. I've used mainly free gear. You can get away with probably even worse gear than mine. The Goblin gear, to be fair, is pretty decent in itself. Probably for this, if you want to do like a beginner team. In my case, I'm going to take a look at Aros. Aros is pretty solid. Like I mentioned before, have him set on just using his first skill. If you are stripping just fine and you do not need this, you can have his other skills available, but this is obviously going to give you the best chance of getting rid of Berserk. His set is the incredibly basic set that I got for free. Apart from this, which is part of the Epic Dash, this stuff is literally everything you get through unlocking Sigrid, unlocking Sirmia, unlocking Vivian through those missions. Ideally, you want to have him on anything that reduces damage taken for the team. Stuff like that can be, for example, Aureus. Aureus is a fantastic option. You can also go with Adamant Shield as well, which will reduce the damage taken of your allies. This basically makes survivability a bit easier. It goes for really any content. Knights generally want damage reduction on everyone in your team. So, main thing you want to take into account with this build is try and give him as much speed as possible. 181 to be honest. It could be like 200, it could be a bit higher, but it kind of gets the job done most of the time for me. Give him high bulk, just like most tanks in this game. They require good HP, good defense, mess around with it, see how well your team is surviving, and then you'll kind of get a good idea. And effectiveness, this is important. If you have a debuffer or anyone that strips, in my case, Adventure Ross needs to have 65% effectiveness. You're going to see the same thing for Iceria. 65% effectiveness, relatively high speed, 181, 200s, even better of course, and high HP and defense. Done. 65% effectiveness, remember that. Ingrain that into your mind. So, damage dealer wise, we'll take a look at the damage dealer. Damage dealer needs high damage, does not need to be incredibly high speed, can honestly be much lower than this, can be like 140, 150. The speed is not as important as long as you do big enough damage to get rid of the ads. If you have higher speed and you have big damage, you'll obviously take more turns, which will kind of speed up your run. So that is kind of something to take into account. But main thing is high attack, high crit rate, high crit damage. Ideally 100% crit rate if you are doing any content in this game that's PvE, because if you miss the crit, you are going to reduce your damage quite a bit. So 100% crit rate is good. Artifact wise, you can use this, you can use anything that increases damage. The main things that most people use for PvE content is Daydream Jokers. Very, very solid, gets the job done. I'd honestly upgrade 3, 4, 5 of these. You will use them along your way. As you can see, I don't even have enough right now. I could use more. So that should tell you everything. You get it for free as well through doing the missions. So take that into account. Now, next up we have Iceria. Iceria, incredibly simple. Requires 65% effectiveness. I do not have that. That's my fault. 65% effectiveness, 200 speed, 200 plus speed. You can probably get away with slower speed, but you really want to be 200 plus speed because it will basically mean you'll be landing a lot of the strips quicker. It will basically save your team a lot faster. It makes life a lot easier. Just trust me, especially with a second skill. This is something you want to pair with Tamarin, but you could pair it with really anyone. But the more times she gets to use her skills, the better, the safer your runs will be. That's simply all I want to say. The main thing you want to really get is the speed, like I mentioned, 65% effectiveness, a good amount of defense and HP. As long as she survives, you've pretty much done it. In terms of artifacts, I've seen some people put her on this. This actually increases allies' attack, except her, by 20%. Helpful for your DPS. Anything that can increase attack of allies is good. Increasing dual attack chance of allies can also be kind of helpful in a way, especially if you have Green Vildred, who does AoEs on his first skill. But really, you can bring anything that supports the team. You can bring anything that increases effectiveness if you want to have an easier time of building her. There's just a lot of versatility with this. You can even use this for effectiveness, like I mentioned. And that is the basic gist for Iceria. I think pretty much that makes it all for the team. Was there... Oh, Tamarin. Yes, Tamarin. Tamarin's one final thing to talk about. This character, great for everything. Great for most PvE content. I'm going to say straight away, high HP, high defense. 100 plus effect resistance is ideal. Doesn't have to be in this boss specifically, but she genuinely wants that. And you also want to have as much speed as you possibly can give her, because the more turns she takes, the better. And that's literally as simple as, if you can get 200 speed, you'll be pretty much set for PvE, and that's the basic gist. We'll take a look at the team one more time. One thing I want to say, anything that can increase healing is good if you don't have anything that can get rid of debuffs. If you have anything that can get rid of debuffs for your team, it will help against the bleed effects that you get on you. So that is definitely something worth taking into account. If you are mega confident and you just don't care, you can maybe bring something that increases damage for your team. If you just have like way too much healing and you have like the most OP Tamarin ever. I'll go ahead and show you the final artifact that will help Tamarin and your team if you actually are getting too many debuffs and you are dying from the bleeds. I believe it's a 4-star artifact. I don't have it on my account, unfortunately. Is Wondrous Potion Vial. If I had my face here. Chance to spell 1 debuff from an ally at the beginning of a turn. Obviously, you will want her to be fast, but this will help her because this will basically reduce the bleeds you have on your allies. More turns she takes, the more bleeds she gets rid of. She does not cleanse by herself, but that obviously brings up a point. Maybe you want to bring an ally that cleanses. Like, for example, I know Montmorency cleanses, but obviously Tamarin offers some more stuff in the kit that makes her generally more viable, even though she doesn't cleanse. That's why you kind of bring the artifact. But anyway, hopefully it's helped. I've tried to make this as conclusive and understandable as possible. If you did actually find this helpful, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Anyway, thank you for watching. I was next one, and most importantly, have a wonderful day, and most importantly, adios.